COPs simply stands for Conference of Parties. It's one of the few international conferences where you have governments, officials, countries coming to make commitments on how to weather the storm in the current new challenge that we're having, that is called climate change. So climate change, as we all know, is a problem now. The United Nations has designated the UNFCCC to be like the driver, to take the driver's seat in issues that are related to climate change. So Conference of Parties is one of the many conferences that have been set aside for countries to come and make commitments on how to cut down on global emissions.
Okay, so COP27 is my first COP. And so when I attended, the whole process was a bit chaotic to me. When I arrived Egypt, I got to the place, the experience and at the airports, yes, you can see a lot of things that they did right, but there's certain things that wasn't clear to us, like taking your passports, trying to document. It wasn't clear because that's not how they do it in other places. So that aspect wasn't clear. I wasn't sure whether it's because I'm black or because I'm Nigerian or because why are you taking my passports. So when we finally arrived at the COP, it was a bit chaotic. It took me a while to understand the direction of things. Like you're looking for something from one place to another, or just too far away, or not properly. The geography, it took me a while to understand it.
Because the COP was it was a bit of an anticlimax, especially given the build up to that COP. I mean, it was everywhere in the media that this was an African COP. And for a COP that was expected to be African in character, we expected to hear the issues affecting Africa on the front burner, of all the conversation. That's not what happened. We didn't hear much of the African issues on the front burner of the conversation. And I think that the capacity of that COP to have delivered any meaningful agenda for change was defeated, perhaps by the overt presence of the fossil industry. The fact that the civil society space in Egypt, especially in Sharm el-Sheikh, did not really gain control of the alternative spaces, did not create alternative spaces, and probably the fact that Egypt is also to a large extent a police state really limited the voice of communities and civil society organizations. So the entire COP was no longer a city-wide affair. It was restricted to a couple of pavilions and a couple of canopies, right? And certainly the physical expression of people's anger, people's dissent, people's hopelessness was really not felt. In the lights and beauty of Sharm el-Sheikh, we lost our voice.
Generally, COP27 for me was nothing so much different from the other COP in terms of actual discussions, actual discussions in the sense that many critical issues, there was a tactical and a deliberate, way to avoid conclusions on very critical issues. And it's which has always been the tradition in COP. And that's why for many years, people go to COP and come out and they are wondering, so what's the achievement? It's always like one step forward, two steps backward. And so COP27 was not so much different from that, from the tradition of succeeding in one way and then failure to have a concrete, discussion or a concrete position. On the other hand, it's like a stick and carrot. And it played out into COP27 in terms of the negotiation. And then the other thing around COP27 was that in terms of the arrangement, generally, the logistic arrangement, it was a COP that was held in Africa, but unfortunately, it was not favorable to Africans.
The COP27 was a mixed bag. In terms of organization, there are quite a bit of things that was in order, but really there were quite a bit that kind of, for me as a civil society person, I feel threatened that the space on civil society may be closing. The location of the COP, Sharm el-Sheikh, is a beautiful city, no doubt. It's also a tourist city and it was quite expensive. And I think that the government of Egypt did not do enough to make the COP, the city affordable to participants. So for the first time, we even saw participants from the global north cutting short their stay to go back. The implication of this is that civil society participation of countries that don't really have much money to devote to such conferences become restricted. So that's a bit of a challenge.
As a youth negotiator, I was nominated by the Federal Ministry of Environment to represent the youth at the decision-making table at COP27, which was a very awesome privilege for me as a young person from Nigeria to actually go through the whole process of negotiations at COP27, see how negotiations have been done, have my own contributions to the negotiation, and also hear the voice of youth, and also see how youth's voices have been amplified at COP27.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we have expectation in regards to just transition, especially how the new world of work is going to be beneficial to workers, to citizens, especially in the public sector, and also to young workers and women in particular, in terms of equitable just transition that will bring benefits to both men and women and young workers as a whole.
Yes, the COP27 made some progress in terms of recognizing loss and damage, but like we had at the conference today, the Post COP27 conference today, there is no way we can also deal with loss and damage without capping current emissions. It will look like you are mopping the floor and still allowing the tap to flow into the room.
Yeah, as a junior negotiator, I'm one of the junior negotiators that was there in COP27 last year. My role is to shadow the negotiators of Nigeria. And I can say that for the fact that I'm a negotiator, I've been able to support mitigation, and I also support a set of loss and damage and adaptation. And my experience was very, very good because I also double as the executive coordinator for African Youth Initiative on Climate Change, where I manage 42 countries. And those experiences for me was to see that we have inclusion of young people in the activities of the COP27, and making sure that this COP27 have a pavilion for young people to have their voices to be heard.
Yes, my experience around COP was that I was able to really have a practical grasp on the negotiation processes. I was able to really see some of the gaps, especially around the negotiation, country representation. And then in the angle of the CSO, there was a lot of challenges because you had, there were a lot of agendas, but luckily, only the loss and damage funds agenda came up, and it was as though to me a bit that so Africa is being manipulated, that we don't really have agendas based on our thoughts.
Okay, my expectation when I was applying to attend, I was expecting a lot of guidance from Nigerian party, To get accreditation is something else. You're not funding me. I just want to go with my own money. So why is it difficult to get accreditation from Nigeria? Why do you have to know someone and know someone and know someone before you to get anything done? Why? You're not giving me any money. I'm using my money. Why is it a problem to get accreditation easily? Then, okay, fine. When we finally arrived and I found it chaotic, like I said, I was thinking that if I go to Nigerian pavilion, I'll get a little bit of clearance. Okay, what are Nigerians supposed to follow? What is our goal? What is our focus? Okay, if I can't get Nigeria, what is African goal?
Given that this COP27 was my first COP, I didn't have much expectations because at first I was really overwhelmed with the whole experience of being a negotiator, because I had to understand my country's position on adaptation, which was a thematic issue I was following at COP.
In terms of gender, my expectation was not met because a lot of parties were going back and forth in terms of the language that should be used, should be included in the gap. And also, there was this struggle between countries that were not successful in implementing the Gender Action Plan in their countries. And most of their reasons was there was no funding. So UNFCCC have been trying to dodge including financial obligations.
My expectation was that we will have the opportunity to have real solid conversation around, real climate issues, right? And I saw the 27 COP as an opportunity for us to stop dilly-dallying around false solutions, right? I wanted to see commitments, core commitments by companies, by heads of government. Of course, given the fact that America had just recently come back into the Paris, climate deal, I expected a lot more. I expected the 27 COP to be much more groundbreaking. I expected to see serious African issues on the agenda.
There are many issues that, concern Africa. The fact that Africa needed to be granted a special status because of our special circumstances, because of our peculiarities. That didn't make much in terms of outcome. Loss and damage, which eventually came up at the end of the extension, is also a big deal for Africa. So there are also the issues of how do we fund energy transition in Africa? How do we deal with the issue of Africa's agriculture,
Well, let me say, I think I started attending COP about 6 or 7 years ago, yeah. That I think starting from COP21, I think that was when I started attending COP. And that the difference I see with this COP is that, this COP was not it was a COP that needed to take certain text decisions. And so this COP succeeded in doing that. Some of the other COPs, in fact, end up without any concrete decision taken at all. And then from most of the COPs that I have attended, apart from the one that talked about, apart from the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol that led to the Paris Agreement, that led to the NDC, I think apart from that, there had not been any other concrete step. This COP has been different in all the other COPs that I have attended, because this is one COP in the last 6 years that came out with a very concrete, strong decision that at least gave some hope. So I think that's, for me, the major message that comes out of COP27 for me, that the world is listening and the world knows that something better needs to be done. And I think we need to build up on that.
My expectation is to see us not discussing the same thing we keep discussing in the same COP. Rather for us to have a stepping forward to talk more on actions that we need to take forward. And it must be region, national, and regional specific. For me, I think based on Nigerian perspective, I think Nigerian government should do more when they are planning for COP. We call it pre-COP. My
experience at COP27 was it wasn't chaotic. It was a bit more organized for my organization, myself and my organization, because we planned ahead of the COP, even though we had a few hitches and challenges, especially following up with the negotiations. So what we did was we invited our partners from the different countries, and even from Nigeria. We looked for sponsorship to invite them for those who were coming to COP for the first time. And we tried to make the experience as less chaotic as it usually is when you get to COP for the first time.
FES is just like an organizing team. We organize, we bring people together and say, okay, fine, you've gone for this conference, you've seen what happened there, so what would you have done better? So we just create that ecosystem, that space, to allow people that have participated in this conference to come and say, okay, based on our last conversation, how did we fare? What do we still need to work more on? Did we meet the aims and objectives that we set in the last post-COP? So what are the new agenda that we should be looking at in the next one? So creating that environment for both networking and collaboration between CSOs and the government is what we really are out here to do. It goes a long way to position or reposition Nigeria in the next COP. So whether we're not doing fantastically well, the fact is that we're moving one step at a time. In no time, we will get there. The speed is not that, like I said, it's not that fast. We're not as coordinated as we thought we would be, but we're more coordinated than we were in the last COP, in the other COP before this just concluded one. So I think if we continue like this, it will go a long way, and one day we will see the Nigerian delegation well coordinated and strategically deployed to handle or discuss the issues that will be raised in the COPs.